While we welcome the Cerebral Palsy community to share their stories, it does not mean as an organisation we endorse and agree with all the views and decisions of our interviewees. Using both human rights and a person-centred approach, CP Diaries is a safe space that allows people from diverse experiences and backgrounds to share their stories. Please note this episode may be confronting for people with CP who have experienced disability discrimination. If this subject matter may distress you, please carefully consider watching this video.
Hi, Josh. So I think we need to provide our listeners with some context of how this all got going. A few months ago, you and I were having our typical Monday morning meeting, and I asked you how your weekend went, and it didn't go well. And we realized that you were describing a scenario to me that's very similar to something I've gone through myself on more than one occasion as someone with cerebral palsy. So, what happened?
Yeah, it was a bit disheartening. That weekend, I was just out with a few friends and we were just wanting to grab a drink because that's what we do on the weekends. It's a social situation. But because my cerebral palsy, I can't walk straight, I constantly look drunk. So the bouncer just took it one look and he was like, "Nah, you're not getting in." Just assumed I was drunk and wouldn't accept anything different.
And that's happened to me too. And when it happens, it's absolutely soul crushingly humiliating.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
I'm assuming you were stone cold sober at the time.
Yeah.
Just to provide some context, Josh,
Yes, I
not
was.
inebriated, we swear, because this does happen. And as strange as this topic might seem to the rest of the community, this does happen in our community, and it hits a real sore spot. It's definitely happened to me. I was thinking about the other week, Josh, you and I went out to a really fun event and we had a few work colleagues at that time. I mean, I don't know if it's because I've had CP my whole life, but you don't look drunk to me. You look like someone who has a mild disability. Do you get frustrated that people can't distinguish the difference, or do you think it's strange that they can't?
Yes, it's very frustrating and it's very difficult to explain because, as you said, they're like, well, you don't look disabled. And then I have to go on and explain what mild cerebral palsy is. And then they think I'm just trying to get in.
Yeah, and then there's that as well. I think it's frustrating that, sometimes it's like we feel the disability is all people see. And then at other times it's like they can't see it when we really need them to make the distinction.
Yeah.
I mean, we're doing this in podcast form, but for our listeners at home, I would describe Josh's gait as like that classic mild cerebral palsy bob. It's funny, I only started using a cane a few years ago, and I was talking to an acquaintance of mine a few years ago. Her daughter has cerebral palsy, and she said, "Well, the good thing about this, Natalie, is people won't mistake you for drunk." And I'm like, "Oh, don't say that. That's terrible." Even though it's got some truth to it. How often does it happen though? Like, obviously there are times where you get in no problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've got those places where, like, unfortunately you have to get like the bouncers to know you. So you've got your regular places where they know who you are, they know what your deal is, so you're accepted. But it's just new places.
And do you find there are some places where it's less likely to happen, or do you find there are places where it's more likely to happen?
So yeah, it really depends whether it's a crowded or event, if there's bouncers. So me and my friends, we now try to go to bars that are a lot more casual and a lot more like not in the scene with like massive uni events and everything.
Yeah, I'm curious to know, when this did happen to you this time, what was the fallout from it? How did you try to handle it? What did your friends think?
My friends really were quite frustrated, if not more frustrated than me. because they were like, you shouldn't have to put up with that. And I kind of just brushed it off. I was like, oh, it's happened again. And they were like, no, you shouldn't feel that way. You shouldn't have settled into, oh, it's just another one of those. It's just happened again. So they were really good at trying to like be like, no, you should be mad at this. We actually organized a meeting with one of the managers of the bars, and we sat down with him and kind of explained the whole situation. I let him know about mild cerebral palsy, and I also let him know of some like initiatives and stuff that they could improve on. They also told me that the bouncers in question were going through some training, and I also asked for an email of that training.
And then that's a funny thing. I mean, look, you raise a couple of things there that I just like. I don't know which to tackle first. The first thing you said.
Sorry, it was a jumble.
No, that's okay. The first thing you said that struck a memory in my mind, because this is I mean, I hate nightclubs, and I think I hate them for this exact reason. I think maybe if I didn't have a disability, I would be out at the clubs every weekend. Who knows?
Yeah.
A different personality. Like maybe my introversion is pre-programmed by my diagnosis. You know, side effects.
That's just it. Yeah.
Homebody. But I have been out at situations, and it's always like those clubs that are right in the heart of the CBD. I've noticed that avoid the CBD, like the clubs, like if you go more towards bars and pubs, maybe if they're more of a niche kind of thing, they tend to be more accepting, where they don't. My rule is that if they don't have to have a bouncer, they probably won't have that level of, you know, that standard. But I remember going out with a few friends once, and that exact scenario came up where, you know, and by the way, and tell me if this rings a bell, we get to the front of the line, we go to get admitted in, and instead of asking me, they lean over to my friend and they say, hey, is she drunk? Right in front of me where I can hear it. And the guy with me gets really emotional and upset. And do you know what he said? He said, oh, come on, mate, she's got MS. And I'm like, no, you've just layered the frustration. So now not only do I have to explain to this bouncer that I'm not intoxicated, I have to explain to this idiot that it's not MS. I've had some revelations with this experience, actually, because I think that same friend said, oh, but I feel sorry for her. And I had to ditch that friendship altogether. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's not what you want.
So it was like a blessing in disguise, I guess.
Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely.
Really messed up way. But I remember being 17 and being like, I can't wait to go night clubbing like my sisters have, because I've got 4 older sisters. I watched all of them reach that milestone and be like, oh, it's going to be so much fun when I do it. And I think,
it's a rite of passage.
Yeah, well said, a rite of passage. And thankfully, on my 18th birthday, rather, my sisters did take me out, and I had a great night. And the bouncer there was lovely. The bouncer did this really cute thing. He was like a big biker dude with a big beard, and kind of looked like Santa Claus. And I presented my ID, because I probably looked all of 15. And
first time, very exciting.
Yeah, and he saw that it had my birth date on it, and it was on my birthday. And he did this, he pointed to his cheek, like the price of admission was a kiss on the cheek. And I'm like, oh, and that was sweet. I wish all my bouncer experiences
adorable.
were like that. It wasn't creepy. It was, it was adorable. It was. But unfortunately it wasn't. And like 2 months later, I had my first false idea of intoxication. And I was I think that particular night I wore these knee-high boots that accentuated my cerebral palsy. On top of walking away from that club and being rejected, I then had to walk down the street, and these randos on the street were identifying me as drunk as well. And it was just like, come on, that to deal with that stone cold sober was painful. And it really had a serious effect on me. And I was in my
Yeah.
final year of high school and I didn't want to deal with that. And I just wanted to be like everyone else. And it was devastating. And I just like, I remember going home with my family and I think one of my sisters said, you just can't go out to clubs like that.
But we should be able to.
Yeah, that's the frustrating thing. It's like access is such a big theme, and it's with other minority groups, it's like a thing of equal access. And it's really funny using the LGBT community as an example. You know how sometimes you'll be driving past a store or an organization and they'll have the rainbow flag to say, they're welcoming of all communities. And I think that's great. But it would be great if we had like something like that for the disabled community, I think.
Yeah, it really would. And on that, there's actually one of the resources that I provided to the manager of where this particular incident took place was kind of an advertising campaign that says we're welcoming of all abilities.
Really?
Yeah.
But it's that thing of there's so many, it's like a humiliation onion. There's so many layers to it.
Yes.
And then in a way, and I don't know if you felt this from your experiences, but like having your friends get really emotional and upset. I think the joke I made to you when you first told me the story was, first time witnessing discrimination, princesses. You get to work that SJW vibe,
Yeah, they get so angry and uptight at the situation. It's quite adorable.
And in another way, it's great because I remember, I'm a bit older than you, Josh. How old are you?
I'm 24.
Okay, you're 24. I'm 34.
Yeah.
10 years makes a difference because I remember, I feel like, and in some ways it's good, some ways it's bad. Your generation is very justice focused. So you've got people getting amped up on your behalf, which is kind of what we need and what we want.
It is.
But there's a fine line between you letting us speak for ourselves, because if you let another person speak for you, suddenly you might have an MS diagnosis.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like that classic example I gave you. So it's weirdly disempowering in a way. What was the outcome from that meeting? So they said they were undergoing training.
I got them to send it to me because I didn't want it to be that typical quiz that they can redo however many times until they get an 100% score. And thankfully it wasn't a quiz like that. And then we basically had a meeting after that where I provided him with the resources of saying they accept all abilities. And honestly, I haven't been back since to see if they've changed, but I really hope they took it on board.
Do you think they did?
Honestly, I don't really have any faith that they did.
Yeah.
Considering how it was. And I just want to say that I'm not angry at the bartenders or angry at the bar in general. It's just the bouncers that the bar happened to have hired. Like, I'm sure the bartenders are lovely people.
I like that you made that point, because I'm not a fan of this intense focus on, cutting down an entire establishment on the basis of one experience. I don't think it's an effective solution. So I like that you mentioned that, and I think it's got some perspective on it. And
it's almost cancel culture at that point, when it's taking down the whole organization.
And I think we're quickly learning that that's on its way out and it's not working. And
definitely,
I think you just have to be pragmatic about it and look at the individual. I don't know. The thing about training segments like that and addressing things in that way is often it's our only avenue of addressing issues like this. I've had a similar experience, not with bars and pubs, but with other situations. And it feels like an obligation, and it feels like, are you really learning anything from the experience?
Yeah, it feels like you're just sitting there, right, I've got to get this done before I can move on to other stuff.
Yeah.
So I won't really pay it that much attention.
What did you do? I mean, you don't want to feel like a box that is being checked. That's my thing as well. I'm just going back to it, and I know it doesn't just happen to the CP community. I'm sure it happens with multiple disabilities where there's a physical ailment present. I know I've spoken to other people. We had an employee here who's got a family condition, presents with similar symptoms, and they had the same issue. And I'm sure it happens with other conditions as well. I just don't understand why they can't distinguish it. Maybe it's because I've gotten so used to seeing things through a disabled lens. Like when I go out to the shop, sometimes I'll see another person with CP and I'm like, oh yeah, you've got it. You've got the giddy up. That's what I call it. Because it's like a giddy up in the gate. But I just...
Yeah, it is.
But you think about a classically obnoxious, intoxicated person being like, oh yeah, hey bro, like we're not walking around doing that.
Yeah, they don't have CP-like symptoms. They're just drunk.
Maybe
it's
they
different.
drag their feet a bit. I don't know. Maybe I'm being overly idealistic. It doesn't happen every time I go out, thank God.
But it's only those one or two situations, and that's enough. That sticks with you, that memory.
That's enough.
And you can't wash it off. It leaves a bad taste in your mouth.
I totally agree. I know that having that experience when I was 18, right at that stage where I should have been going out to clubs, and it was right before I enrolled in uni.
You should have been celebrating.
Exactly. And I feel
you got that ripped.
Yeah. And I feel like it, it created a certain degree of social anxiety in me in the years that followed that took a long time to wash off.
It just stemmed from one bad event.
Yeah, or one or two bad events. It's like, friggin' hell, this is why I don't go out. One of the things I think that is relevant is I've gotten better at picking better venues. I hate to say it, but we might have people listening at home who've had this experience. I mean, that's why we're doing this episode. And they might be looking for similar solutions. And it's kind of one of those scenarios that doesn't have really an ideal, simple solution.
Yeah, it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of problem.
Yeah. And it's not, and I think the thing about it is, I don't know, I've gotten a better gut. Like, it's terrible as it is to say this, if they have to have a bouncer out the front, the place is probably not ideal.
Yeah.
And that's
definitely.
a light way to put it on this podcast. But, I think that's been my way of approaching it. You get really selective about where you'll go. How did you look after yourself in the days and weeks that followed? Because I know how depressing it can get. What did you do to look after yourself?
In the days after, my friends were really good. They were constantly messaging me and checking up on me on how I was. So that was really good. And as you know, I had that rant to you about it that morning where I let off some steam about it. And I tried not to let myself get too caught up about it. I just tried to focus on other things and kind of just force myself to move forward rather than just getting stuck up in the situation.
Which can be easier said than done, but I think it's really
Absolutely.
good. What advice would you offer to a person in our community? Because I think having someone who's actually gone through it or has the same situation as you, the same diagnosis, that makes a difference as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the bouncer got one job to do, and their job is to just refuse you entry. They won't listen as much as you try and talk to them. They won't listen. So getting actually a manager or a bartender who will actually listen and then speak to the bouncer, that can do a whole lot.
Yeah. Have you done that before?
Yes. One of my friends I went to uni with is a bartender. So sometimes I get him to speak to bouncers, and I guess just the fact that he is a bartender at the establishment, or he's in the kind of business, I guess,
He's
that
in
just gives him a level of
he does the
authority.
secret handshake.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I get it. We're laughing about it. And yet again,
Oh,
here
you
we
have
come at
to
this.
after the fact.
Yeah. Here we come again at there's no perfect solution to this problem. It's not a mathematical equation, you know, and because the thing about can I speak to the manager used to be an extreme scenario. Do legitimately need to speak to the manager.
Yeah.
Now it's got that certain stigma on it that I won't say, but I think
Yeah,
we all know what it is.
stigmatized.
And
Yeah.
look, and there are many instances where the speak to the manager scenario, the stigma it has earned is valid because there are people abusing that card. Let's preface that. But I don't know. I was just thinking again in my head, if I had to deal with it now as a 34-year-old woman, what would I do? I mean, it's funny. Sometimes my support worker or I have to call a venue in advance and say, look, I've got a disability. I want to know if you've got accessible staircases or ramps because I'll be
Yeah.
coming tonight. Or do you have seating, you know? And it's almost that preface of warning, you know, a disabled person is coming. It almost puts it in the forefront of their mind. But
Yeah, it does, but
Yeah.
sometimes they need it.
yeah, and I wonder if that's their
That's-
solution, or
Yeah.
even just calling in advance and saying, have you catered to disabled patrons in the past? And I know, of course, people are going to say, oh, we welcome everyone, but not if you think they're drunk.
I suppose one thing that it has made me do more often, and this probably could be seen as a benefit, but
Mhm.
it's actually made me wear my AFOs more often.
Yeah,
Because if they try to say anything like that, I'll just show them that I'm wearing an orthotic.
yeah.
That way, they definitely know I have a disability.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, but with my friend, the mum of the woman with CP, who I have a lot of respect for, as much as I hated when she said it, since using a cane, I haven't had to deal with the issue since. I don't know. It's terrible that we have to go to these lengths, you know, but I get it. I
Yeah,
do.
but not everyone has physical, like assistive things that they can bring with them or use.
And then you almost wonder, is it worth going to Priceline and picking up like a cane for $20? I'm serious.
Yeah, that does go across your mind.
Yeah, because you could, like,
Yeah, I even tried pulling up my NDIS plan and my pensioner concession stuff on my phone, but the bouncer just wasn't having it. He wasn't interested.
Really?
Like I said, he's got one job to do and he wasn't interested in hearing otherwise.
Yeah. Do you have surgical scars?
Yes, I do.
So for our listeners who can't see, Josh is showing us a scar on the most upper part of his forehead.
Yeah.
I've never noticed that.
That was where a shunt was inserted and then later removed.
Right.
And I also have scars on my knees as well because I've had them cut open.
So have I. I mean, the only scenario I can think of where I've been tempted to do that is when I use a disabled parking permit and I get some dude like, you don't look very disabled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hate that.
Yeah.
Or when you're using a disabled bathrooms.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that brings up a memory. When I was very young and I was at a youth camp, I went to the disabled bathrooms, and as I was walking out, I just got so many glares and salty looks just because
shaking of the head, squinting of the eyes.
Yeah. And I didn't want to. I went to a whole different toilet block after that. I just didn't want to go back there.
Yeah.
Don't want to have to put up with that fear of judgment.
So I think we need to wrap it up, but because it's always hard to know how to wrap these things up appropriately.
It really is.
Especially when you're getting into really heavy content like this.
Yeah.
takeaways, thoughts, suggestions for our listeners?
I think just to be like picky and, yeah, as you said, selective about the places you go. Unfortunately, they need a bouncer. It's probably a no-go place because they're just gonna ask too many questions, be too judgy, and you don't want that to ruin your night.
No, and it really can ruin your night.
Yeah, because this happened, what, 3 or 4 or 5 months ago, and it's still front of mind for me. It's still fresh.
Fair point. Thank you for sharing this story. I do appreciate you joining us today to discuss this experience because it's not easy to discuss.
Yeah, no worries.
Josh, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
No worries.